Hey gang, Chris Merman here. I've got a new intro for a podcast series that we sent back a few years ago. We decided to do some hokey holiday fun and record a different podcast talking about all 12 of the manifesto principles and kind of wrapped this into 12 Days of Christmas, and then Jay turned into dorky intro song, and you know how all that stuff goes. You know us by now. The cool part about this series, though, is it's an evergreen conversation, which is why, we maybe not every year, but we try to re-put these out, right? There's a new audience all the time. There's new content all the time. Most of our active Discord users, I would argue, might not have even heard this series before. So we wanted to put out the 12 Days of Agile because the conversation about the principles always needs to happen. It always needs to change. There's different contexts. Last 2 years, much different context than when we first released this series. The idea of one principle being more important than the others, Paul and Jay talk about that in this episode. It is interesting. It also, at the same time, it's like, okay, well, what does it mean to deliver early and continuously and valuable? And why is that the most important, right? Is it possible that you could deliver something valuable and you do it in a completely terrible way and people are fried? Yeah, that's called a lot of the processes that we work on today. It is funny, though, to think about what does continuously, what does often, what does valuable, right? Like, what does all that mean? It's a conversation that's constantly evolving as technology changes, then the conversation changes, and people need to adjust with the technology. It's a fun conversation, and I think that as we get into this last few weeks of the year, this is a good time to have it. So, listen, tell us what you think. I'm curious. Maybe not necessarily do the principles need to be changed or adjusted. That conversation, the first 2 or 3 times I had it was funny, but I don't know that I find value in continuously saying, does this principle still matter the way it was written? It's impossible that something could matter. Something that's sort of timeless as the manifesto and principles still is kind of dated in a way, and so that doesn't mean that they're invaluable. It just means we need to have a conversation and continuously look at context and reevaluate where they're at. So, So this week, principle number 1, all of those fun things. Give us a listen. Jay and Paul have what they tried to have and I think they succeeded, is an intelligent, high-minded conversation about the very first principle. Which, again, in my mind, there's no priority order in it, because if that's the case, the 12th one's probably one of the most important ones, and it's last. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with Paul that they're in priority order, but it is interesting that they picked this one first, and they said the highest priority. So I don't know. You tell me. Is it still the highest priority? Do we even know how to have a conversation about this? Is maybe the conversation itself a success metric of this principle? I don't know. I do think this is a fun convo. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hope you had a great 2021. And here we go.
This is Alistair Coburn. You're listening to Agile Uprising Podcast.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising Podcast. I am your host for this episode, Hrcsko. Joining me is fellow board member Paul Elia. And this is the first day of the 12 Days of Agile podcast series, where we're going over all the Agile principles that were part of the manifesto. And we'd like to deconstruct them, have a little bit of conversation about them, and even come back with some suggestions for maybe how we would integrate this into the actual Christmas Carol going forward. So first of all, Paul, thank you for taking the time to join me.
Yep, always good time with you, Jay.
Likewise. So we drew the straw with the first principle. Verbatim, the principle reads, and I quote, "Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software." So, Paul, let's unpack that. I know you and I were just starting, before the show, we had a conversation where we were starting to actually go through word by word. So when you read this, what are the parts that jump out at you, and what are the things that are most important in this principle, based upon your interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in here that we could talk about. I think it's important to note, since we're talking about the first principle, our listeners may or may not have gotten around to our manifesto signatory series, where we have 14 out of the 17 people that were in Snowbird February 2001 that came together and aligned on the values. The values were aligned face to face, and the principles were aligned, so we hear through the interviews, through back and forth exchange via email. So I think that's interesting, and I think you can see that there's more of a mix of points of view in the principles than in the values. So as we go through these here with the first one, to me, it's something interesting to keep in mind. But they put this one first. This is the highest priority, and that's to satisfy the customer. So that's cool. I think we could talk about customer, but I like that the highest priority, and this was the first, was to take care of, satisfy the customer. We have early and continuous delivery, and then we have valuable. And the word happens to be software now, but we're thinking about Agile beyond the software industry. But for sure, this was a group that was concerned about software.
Right. I also think it's fairly interesting that, the whole Snowbird Conclave happens, the Agile Manifesto comes out, like you said, the principles come back out almost as not an afterthought, but a next logical step. And the idea of continuous delivery, while rooted in XP, it comes out as part of the principles, but only recently are we starting to see the whole rise of the DevOps movement and the rise of continuously delivering value to your customer uninterrupted, without the traditional delays that deal with trying to traverse an organization and have all your operations people in a row. So I think it's a pretty important part. Like you said, you can deconstruct every single word here. I think the continuous delivery statement is fairly important in the principle, but I do like the fact that, like you said, number one principle is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. And I think sometimes one of the remarks you made before we started is we were talking about enterprise IT, Paul, and you said, sometimes our internal customers, they don't really get a choice. They're almost stuck with us. So that's an interesting way to look at how we deal with our quote unquote business partner, our business sponsor, for lack of a better term, where, yeah, they're stuck with us and we're almost stuck with them. However, no matter what, our highest priority should be to satisfy them. And it's through delivering value, software, hardware, whatever it may be. But I think that's a thing that maybe some teams miss, is that at the end of the day, it all comes down to delivering value to the customer. And I think sometimes we get a little too caught up in the methodologies and the whys and the wherefores and lose sight of that.
Yeah, I thought it would be just interesting before the talk here tonight. I looked up Google for customer, and it's got two definitions, and it just makes me chuckle. The first one's a person or organization that buys goods or services from a store or business. Okay, great. That's kind of what I had in mind when I saw the phrase. But the second one is a person or thing of a specified kind that one has to deal with. And the example they give is a fish is a slippery customer and very hard to catch. I kind of like that. It's the internal customer can kind of be the number two sometimes, right? They don't really have that choice, like we were saying, of coming to you. Are you taking care of them just the same? But I'm also a very big believer that the number one definition is the one you got to focus on. I love the goal. Goldrat's the goal. And that's one of the themes in that book. The customer is if you're in a for-profit organization, it's who pays money to the organization. So collectively, your system of people and processes and tools need to take care of the customer. That's what I take away.
Right. And I will say that as the capital A Agile industry grows, I think sometimes we sort of forget the forest for the trees, in that certain practitioners from all different job titles and all different responsibilities in our journey, sometimes they forget, and I have seen this in my career, where people forget that at the end of the day, the customer is looking for you to deliver them value. What they deliver is valuable, be it software, be it a new function, new feature, what have you. They don't really care what at least it's been my experience, that they don't really care what methodology you use to get there. So as long as the value is getting to them, if you want to do it with typing with your right hand over your left, sitting Indian style in the room in the dark, so be it. And I think one of the potential pitfalls is maybe we lose sight of that, where we get so caught up in tools and process and scaling framework that we forget at the end of the day it really does come down to delivering value. Because if you're not delivering value, what are you actually doing?
Right. And now value is a tricky one, right? It does say valuable software, and I think we all acknowledge, we love Josh Kirievsky's Modern Agile, and he's clear. We're not just talking about software. Happens to be my area of expertise. So I was reading the work of several of the guys that were part of the Snowbird event, Martin Fowler, Kent Beck. Back then, I started programming in the mid '80s. That work was about software. I do think we should be clear about that, but I do think we also accept it. Little a, big, I guess it's big A, we're expanding the scope. But what does it mean to deliver valuable stuff? Let me just say stuff instead of software. If you deliver, but it takes a long time and it costs a lot of money compared to other choices a customer may have, that affects the value proposition, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not enough to just show up. I think you have to be mindful of how competitive and innovative the world is right now.
The statement in here about early and continuous and value. So like you said, value is it's very subjective, right? It's not to say that value is always customer value is always defined as X. It's not algebra. It is very subjective. But the early and continuous part, I'm always hearkened back to. I think there was I think it was Heinrich Nyberg did a presentation where he talked about the role of a product owner, and he talks about Agile, and it has the 4 different steps where I want to get from A to B faster. And he has the frowny face as the step 1, you build the chassis, step 2, you build the wheels, step 3, you build the engine, and step 4, you build the car. And at the 4th step, you get the smiley face. Whereas if I go from a skateboard to a scooter to a bicycle to a motorcycle to a car, I'm happy the whole way because while not perfect, I am getting value. And I think that in a nutshell encompasses what we're trying to accomplish at the crux of this principle is you're delivering value, what the customer needs. You're doing it early and you're doing it continuously. Right. It's not a one giant whiz bang release into production of every single feature known to man where we all know that 20% of them get used all the time, 80% of them basically just sit on the shelf. So, Paul, let's interject some real life here. So can you think of a personal example where this principle was not necessarily paid the mind that it needed to, and then things sort of went astray as a result?
Thinking about a particular example, I don't want to name names, but I am thinking
Company X.
I am thinking of a particular example where the company's agenda is what was pursued by the software team. They were listening internally to ideas like the product owner is not the customer. A good product owner has the customer's ear and can articulate back and really stand in for the customer. But the product owner is not the customer. When you're in an environment where product owners are basically squabbling for resources, I used the word, I meant people, money, right? And the opportunity to work with teammates to deliver software. When the product owners are squabbling for that, they sometimes have fudged the numbers and they go after their own personal agendas, and that's not the customer. Those scenarios of scarcity of resources, personal agendas, and also really not listening to the market and the customer, but going on an idea that was generated internally and not validated early enough, those are the off-the-rail situations.
You bring up a good point, Paul, when you have product owners who, due to and I have seen this, due to the structure of the organization, their culture, the way their work gets done, where they're forced to actually fight to validate their existence instead of fighting to deliver value, it's very easy for them to lose sight of the quote-unquote customer. We also sort of do them a disservice by forcing them into almost a fight or flight response where they forget about the customer. They're just worried about their continued existence in the world of work that they're doing. And it's not a good look.
No, and it's not just of the product owner. I mean, I happen to be cut from the cloth of I've got to be where the action is, where we're building something. Steady state isn't for me. It doesn't sit well with me. That's not everybody, and I'm probably in the minority to even think that way. When you prefer to know what you're going to do routinely, and the who moved my cheese type thing, when the cheese moves and the market moves and what the customer thought was valuable yesterday is not the same as today, and somebody's not paying attention to that for the organization, that's another example of the bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not doing the experiments and you're not checking in, I mean, that's by checking in early and continuously and delivering things and saying, "Hey, customer, how do you like me now?" That's insurance against having the wrong hunch, placing the wrong bet.
It makes me think of in the interview that we did with Tom and Mary Poppendick, where I think Ryan quoted Mary as saying, "You want to deliver fast enough so the customer can't change their mind." I've said that a couple times since to a couple of people, and they sort of chuckle, but it's brilliant in its brutal honesty.
It is,
because if you let it sit out there, I want it blue. No, I want it red. No, I want it green. No, now I want it blue again. Whereas if you come to me and say, I want it blue, and bang, I come back and say, Paul, it's done. Here it is. It's blue. Now what? It completely changes the narrative. It changes the focus of not only the conversation, but the planning and path forward. It actually makes the customer's life easier because they don't have to spend time dithering or second guessing their decision making. Exactly. You make a decision, like you said, we do the experiment, we put it out there, and we see what happens.
Yeah, if you were to, let's say you needed to take a tree down at your house and you called 3 companies, like the old adage of get 3 quotes. One of them says, well, I'll get a guy out there next week to take a look. And the next one says, well, I can have somebody out there today to take a look. And they come and then they say, well, I got to call back to the office and we'll get back to you. But the third one comes and says, not only can I come out today, I can take that tree down on the spot, right? There's value in that right there. Regardless of the price, there's some value in the delivery of that service being that quick and that expedient.
Absolutely. You can't, you know you need it. You don't have to worry about dithering about the decision. Paul shows up and says, I can do it right now. Here's my price. As long as you think that price is fair and that cost is fair, you're going to go through with it. And your life's going to be easier because it's one less thing you got to worry about.
There's value because you got rid of the tree that's been bothering me and you did it quick. There's value in that quick, right?
Right. And I will say, as someone who's well dipped in the PM side of the house, coming for anybody who's listening to the podcast knows I have a very heavy project management background. This is where I think orgs almost are their own worst enemy, where there is that overriding urge based upon culture, previous history, to basically analyze and plan to death what we're delivering for the customer. Whereas your business partner, the one who's funding your program, just wants the work. And if you tell them, yeah, in 9 months, I'm going to deliver you this awesome solution, what happens in 9 months to deliver what amounts to a Pinto, where it works great, but one fail move and everything explodes? Where conversely, if you could start delivering quicker, okay, well, I've got the UI for the first part of your process up, got the back end built, let's get that in prod. Now let's build the second step. Now let's build the third step. You generate smiles quicker. Corporate IT, we all know, has that awful stereotype that we're expensive and we take forever, and what we deliver 9 times out of 10 isn't really what they want. Well, maybe it is what they want, but it's what they wanted 9 months ago. But because it took us 9 months, now we're already a dinosaur.
Yep.
So I think that's a true problem with a lot. It's a pain point with a lot of organizations that are going the cultural mindset shift to Agile, where you got to get used to delivering quickly and early. So then this way you start seeing how the customer thinks. And it's not, they don't tell you what they want, they tell you what they need. And the need is the big thing.
It's all tied together. And this is a good phrase. I have no doubt that thought went into this phrase because it's being early in delivering your value and doing it continuously that makes it even more valuable. Going back to the tree example, I'm doing that on purpose because I know that we would like to, in the industry, expand beyond software. and that it's happening. Using the analogy of, I want the tree taken down. If everybody's saying they're going to be 1 or 2 weeks to get back and take the tree down, I now want to start thinking about the cheapest guy, right? What we've done in a lot of IT shops is we just looked for the cheapest IT we can find, and we're getting what we paid for. But if one of them rises above and takes this concern of my tree falling on my house away from me, I'm willing to pay a slight premium for that. I'm not going to go crazy. You can't be 3x what the slow guys are going to do, but I'll pay a premium because there's an opportunity cost. I mean, maybe the tree falling on my house could cause me a lot of damage. I don't have the proper insurance. I don't know. Maybe I'm about to go on vacation and I just want the peace of mind. So again, it's staying away from the software, but in the software biz, there's real cost of delay. There's opportunity we're missing out on by not giving some solutions sooner. And it doesn't have to be the big shebang, but something like the car analogy that you gave, that's a great illustration.
Right. And it also makes, not only does the customer, I think your customer, your sponsor, your whomever you're tasked with delivering value to, not only does it make them happy that they're getting something for their efforts, but it also forces them to almost think faster, in the sense that I know if I go to Paul and I ask for this, I know that within a quick iteration of 2 to 4 weeks, I'm not going to dig out that argument from last night.
Unrelated podcast. Unrelated podcast.
For those of you who are listening, look at the Scrum Guide 2017 update podcast. Listen for that one.
And it pushes absolutely no buttons with me, so I'm calm now.
But your point is valid, right? In the sense that if I know that if I go to Paul and I say, Paul, right now, right this minute, I need X. And I know that in 2 weeks, you're going to come back and X is going to be ready. After 2 or 3 experiences like that, not only do I start to expect your responsiveness and I expect your results, I now need to think ahead of myself, or I'm going to end up with, you're going to blow through my backlog,
right,
and I'm not going to have any work for you. And that's dangerous, because then you're going to go looking for other customers to deliver value to. And it's not a good look. So it helps enable the customer, your partner, project, sponsor, what have you, to start thinking ahead of not only themselves, but the market and where they want to go. And that's I think one of the unintended consequences of early and continuous delivery is it forces them to get almost proactive with their own destiny.
Yeah, it does happen, and I think that's a good times problem. That's a step in the maturity progression when the backlog starts to run dry because there aren't any ideas and because the team is moving that quickly. You said 2 weeks, and I want to call out too. Let's say you're doing some form of Agile where you do 2-week increments. Doesn't mean you have to deliver only once every 2 weeks, and that was a positive clarification in the Scrum Guide update. Distinction was made that in Scrum, having a 2-week iteration doesn't mean you can only deliver once every 2 weeks. So that's a good distinction. And I don't care what practice you're following. And really, I don't care if you're following waterfall. Trying to find your way from there to somewhere custom for your organization for good reason, you should still look for opportunities to deliver value every day. Find a way to get in touch with the customer and run your wireframe by them before you spend the time banging on the keyboard.
Truth be told, Paul, I know this is slightly off topic, but I'm amazed that even needs to be called out. I think the whole point of iterative thinking, agile thinking, lean, and this whole Scrum type thinking is as soon as you get it ready, it goes out the door. You don't have to wait for a phase gate to say, oh, well, we hit the end of our iteration. I'm a big fan of just get it done, get it going, get it moving. Get the tree cut down so I can move on to getting the roof redone on the garage, so then I can move on to adding insulation so I can make it a 4-season part of my house. I don't understand why it even needs to be called out that you want to wait. No, if you say it's going to take 2 weeks, it takes 2 days. Well, at the end of 2 days, let's push it and find something else to do in that remaining 12 days.
All right, you pushed my button again, so I got to go. You pulled my string. So yeah, that bugged me too. Look, close to 500,000 people got their CSM. Now, I was a late bloomer to that. Frankly, when Snowbird event occurred, I didn't catch wind of it right away, but within 6 months I did. And I was doing Spiral, and I loved it. It was fine for me. And so when I looked at Spiral, I considered to be part of this family of stuff. Most people have never even heard of Spiral. Look up Spiral model on Wikipedia. Barry Boehm. Now, I actually thought I invented Spiral because I was using the word spiral before I ever thought I heard of Barry. But the thing is he did a famous paper in 1988. I didn't know about it till later, where he came up with this model, and damn, the diagram looks similar, only I just thought that the motion went into the bullseye instead of out of the bullseye. Attacking risk and delivering incrementally was part of what I was doing too. And I just used the word spiral to describe it because you have to go get money to finance your stuff. And I'm doing it today, and I've done it most of my career, if not all. You're constantly pitching for money. How do you convince management that there isn't a straight line Gantt chart way to think through a problem this tough? I saw a spiral. So when Scrum started becoming all the rage, I'm like, it's cool, whatever. I like what I'm doing. I liked XP, loved XP. So again, I thought, I got it. Whatever this thing is, it's cool. But man, it just grew and grew and grew to a point where it was a crescendo in the 2010s, right? Still in it, but bam, it's off the charts. So I had to go get my CSM. But me and 500,000 other people sat through a 2-day class and took a 36-question multiple choice exam that was pretty much a participation badge.
I don't know, it's not to take us further down this rabbit hole, but I don't know if you saw there was a quote on Twitter by Scott Ambler where it said the only prerequisite for this certification is that your check doesn't bounce.
And I'm not going to name names. The person that taught me that also taught me my CSPO and is a friend to this day. Very smart, knows his stuff. And there are lots of people in the Scrum world that know their stuff. There are gurus left and right, including Sutherland and Schwaber and Dave West. I can keep calling out names of people who impressed me. I'm going to call out Mike Cohn. Mike's been very generous with his time over the years and answering questions of mine. Scrum's a fine tool, and it's pretty easy to get that cert. And if you make it that easy to get a cert, people are going to have questions like, do I have to wait the full 2 weeks to deliver?
True. Good point.
You missed the boat to even have that thought. And you could tell there was frustration in the video event when they unveiled the Scrum update. They did a video cast, and a pretty large one. And there was frustration in their voices like, do we even have to say that a time box is a maximum value and that you could end early? Ken said something to the effect of, Scrum's not for people who can't think. I love it. I mean, but oops, you gave it out pretty easy. So I mean, we've taken our little tangent here to get back to the principle. I do think these questions are coming up because people who've never written a line of code are Scrum Masters. They don't have the appreciation for the roots of this, which is in software. I'm glad that Agile's expanded, and Lean always was a bigger scope, but the roots are here in software.
Right. So, in keeping mind of the time, and I know we were trying to keep these episodes short, I will leave on a somewhat humorous note. So, Paul, if we were having to redo the actual Christmas Carol, 12 Days of Christmas with 12 Days of Agile, this is obviously the first day. So, my question to you is, and I know I only posed this to you right before we started, if you had to redo the actual Christmas Carol for today, how would you do it on the first day of Agile? My mentor gave to me. How would you finish that statement?
Do I have to do 12 somethings or one? I mean, we're
no, just one, because we're the first principle.
Just the tip of advice on this one is don't make it mean that you have to compile and package and deliver code through your full release process. Like I'm in a regulatory environment right now. I'm not going to be able to be like Amazon, for example, and deliver every 11 seconds. And hell, that's a stat that's 3 or 4 years old at this point. I think they're truly continuously delivering now. Like they keep the lights. We can't do that for good reason, but it doesn't mean that I can't give value to my customer every day. So I have to find other ways to deliver value, deliver that wireframe, get that better understanding of what they need, get their feedback on an idea before you execute on it. There are ways to deliver value to your customer every day. Just put that thinking cap on.
Perfect. I will cap that by saying, on the first day of Agile, my mentor gave to me value via continuous delivery. That's my off-the-cuff answer.
Oh, you're going to do yours to music. That's why yours could actually be done to music. That's good.
We'll have a follow-up podcast where everybody's a little in the bag and we start singing, and I'm sure that will go over real well. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for your time. Much appreciated. I hope this was fun for you. This was really fun for me. Like someone made the remark that a lot of people haven't even read the Scrum Guide. I wasn't even super familiar with the principles until, say, less than a year ago. I always knew it was just the book, Deliver via Scrum. So I find this is a cool mental exercise to walk through it. For that, I thank you. And once again, thank you for your time, Paul. Thank you again to our listeners. I hope this was fun, and you've got 11 more episodes to go. So enjoy.